Hello everyone and welcome. I am excited about this month's topic, which is painting animals. And this is something that when I started painting with pastels, it was the first subject matter that I painted. And I thought I was really going to be an animal painter. That's really what I was interested in. But the classes that I took all stressed landscapes. So I naturally kind of became a landscape painter. So it's fun every once in a while to revisit animals and paint them. And the thing about it is animals can teach us so much about painting. So even if you think, I don't want to paint an animal, and by the way, we're going to paint birds, cats and dogs and frogs and fish. It runs the gamut. So what I want to say is hang in there if animals are not your thing, because the lessons that I'm going to share with you about value, about painting color, interesting color, about edges and composition and how to treat a background and mark making, all of these things we utilize when we paint an animal, and then we can apply them to the subjects that we really want to paint. So hang in there if you think, I don't really want to paint a cat, because you can learn a lot from painting a cat. So what I want to do for today's video is give you a few introductory things about painting animals. I'm going to do a painting. I'll see how far along I get. I like to keep the videos under 30 minutes, so we'll see how far I get on the actual painting. I actually do an animal or paint an animal a little bit differently than I approach a landscape. So I have a very different process, but if you have followed me long enough and you've seen me do landscape demos, you'll be able to see how I've applied this knowledge to the landscape. So what I'm going to do with this cat is the same thing I do in a landscape, only it just doesn't seem the same way. It'll make sense. It'll make sense when I start. Michael's shaking his head like, I don't think you're making sense. But trust me, it's going to make sense. I do it a little bit different, but yet underlying it all, it's the same thing. All right. So let's talk about this. I have so much to share about this. I think really for this demo, it's an introduction. So I'm going to touch on a lot of things that we will expand on later in the month with our monthly lessons. The first thing that I want to talk about, I guess I'll just share, is the paper that I like to use whenever I paint an animal. I'll use any paper, of course, and I love UArt. That's my favorite, but I really like to work on LaCarte paper by Sennelier when I paint an animal, especially an animal with fur, so a cat. I like it for a couple reasons. It's soft, and so it gives a soft effect to the painting, and it comes in various colors, which really help unify the painting. So where this color of this toned paper peeks through, it'll help unify the painting. I selected this color, which is an orangey brownish color, because that was really the only color of LaCarte that I had, but fortunately it's going to work really well for the colors in the cat that I'm painting. So LaCarte paper, I'm going to give a review later in the month, so I'm not going to say anything more about it except for you don't want to get it wet. So we're not going to do any kind of wet underpainting. What else? The way I approach painting an animal is that I don't look at the local color of an animal. So if I were to say, oh, my son has a black cat, that's a black, and you would think, oh, I'm going to use black. I'm going to pull out black. Well, I don't use black on a black animal. I don't use white on a white animal, and I don't use gray or brown or red, the typical animal colors. But what I prefer to do is build up my color by layering pastels of the same value. And it doesn't really even matter what color it is until the very end, and that's when you'll put on your local color. And again, that's going to make more sense once I start. And I'm going to do an entire lesson on fur color later in the month, so we'll get more about that. And I also have a video coming and a demonstration of color by value, which is what I'm going to be showing you with this demonstration. Alright, the pastels that I'm using, I'm going to give this a try. I've not really used these very much. This is the Nomad set Blue Earth Pastels. Now Blue Earth Pastels, I'll pick one up so that you can see the shape and size. They're not very big. Okay, here we go. They're not very big, and they're super soft. So look at how much pigment came off on my finger. They're super soft. But what I like about them is they are arranged, and can you pick up this? They are arranged by value. So we have this color brown, for example. There's a dark one, a middle light, and a light. So as you go towards the center, they get lighter. So this row are all the same value. This row is all the same value, etc., and so on and so on. So what does that mean for us? If we are painting by building up layers of value, it's very simple that we can say, oh, I can use all of these in my dark areas. I can use all of these in my light areas. And again, I'm going to do a lesson on this to expand upon this, but I just want to give you an overview. So we'll see how it goes. Alright, so when we're painting an animal, unlike a tree, we do have to get the drawing correct, because otherwise it might not look like that animal. So we do have to work on the drawing, and if drawing is not your thing, if you find that you need to work on drawing skills, that's something that, start a sketchbook, and that's helpful. You will get better at it. Sometimes I like painting a landscape because a tree doesn't have to be perfect, but animals, we do have to get it right. So this is how I do it. Everyone approaches it in a different way, but I eyeball it. All right, I did the drawing already, but I took some photos, so in the comments I'm going to show you the photos of that process. But the first thing that I do is I mark off where I want the end of the animal. So I don't want the face of the cat to go any lower than this mark, otherwise it's too close to the bottom. I don't mind if it goes off the page, but I don't want it to be touching the page or the edge on all areas, or it will look cramped. The other thing is, if you have got an animal that has open eyes and they're looking, we as viewers will automatically try to look to see what the animal is looking at. It's just kind of a natural thing. Now this animal's sleeping, so it doesn't really matter. But if you've got a cat, let's say, that's looking out at you, you want to leave viewing room. So in other words, you wouldn't put his head here, because we would look over here to see what they were looking at. So pay attention to where the placement of your animal. You want to give them breathing space. So I made the marks as far as where I wanted the animal to fit in, and then I just started drawing. Now that's all good if you can draw it perfectly and get the proportions perfect by eyeballing it. But I always want to check by measuring, and we certainly could do an entire month on how to measuring the figure, measuring buildings. So I'm not going to do that. We will get to that. But I'm going to just show you quickly how I make sure that the proportions are correct in my drawing. After I draw it first. I take my chances, but then I make corrections by measuring. So how do I do that? I take a bamboo skewer. Oops. You can really use a pencil or anything. And now here's my photo. And by the way, this is my cat, Toby. And I find one area to measure. So I'm going to measure in between the ears. So I put the skewer here, and I put my thumb right here. So in between the ears on Toby and the photo, it's this big. So then I say, okay, how does that area compare to another area? And let's see, I want to, what could we check? This, maybe. At the top of his head should be the same measurement. What else should be the same measurement? From the bottom of his ear to the tip of his nose should be the same. All right, so let's take that idea and check our drawing. So, in the drawing, from one ear to the next is this big, right? So now let's check. We said that it should be from the bottom of the ear to the tip of the nose should be the same. And it pretty much is. It's a little bit long, but it pretty much is. What else did we say? From the top of the ear to the top of his head, well, where the head kind of rolls over, should be the same. So it's here and it's here. That is correct. Okay, let's try it again. Let's check the height of his back. So from the bottom of his tail to the top of the highest point of his back is this big. Let's see where else it should be the same. From the back of his tail to where his ear starts. All right, so let's check. Bottom of his tail to the top of his back, and then if I do this, it should go to where the ear starts. I forgot. Here to here and here to, yeah, okay, so here to here should be here to here, but I have it wrong. It really needs to be shorter, right? Yeah, it needs to be shorter, so I'm going to correct it and just cut that in. That's really a minor adjustment, but it could make a difference. So I would go through and just do those kind of measurements, measure your photo and find things that compare, and then you can make corrections. What am I using? I'm using a pastel pencil, which I very rarely use, but I need to use something that's not going to put an indentation on the paper, because this paper is fragile. If I were to use a pencil, it would make a line. So you want to actually work with it very, very lightly. And I kind of don't mind, they don't have to be precise lines, because I'm going to make changes as I start the painting. Alright, so that is a very, very quick lesson on measuring, and again, that's something that we really could focus a lot more time on, but it is how I work out the drawing and make sure that it's as good as it could be. Alright, so here's the fun part. I'm going to, this is like a 3 or 4 step process. The first thing I'm going to do, block in all the dark areas. Next thing, block in all the light areas. And then everything else should be something that's in between, or a middle value. I also want to address the background as I am addressing the cat. I don't want to wait till the end and then have the cat look like it's pasted on. So I'm going to start with the dark areas. How do I know what's a dark area and what's a light area? Well, I'm going to squint. And when I squint at my photo, all of a sudden the dark areas kind of they blend all together, and I can see exactly where they are. So I can see that, and I'm going to use a very light touch with the side of my pastel. So one thing that's black, or dark rather, is that ear, and then it kind of goes into his face and down to his nose and a little bit up the side of his face. And then this ear over here is also dark. Now this ear's got a funny shape because it's coming towards me, so that's a little bit tricky. What else is dark? His paw is dark. There's actually, I don't know what that is, if it's the other paw or not. His tail is a dark shape. And I'm using blue because I'm not worried about the local color. This is gonna be, you're gonna be hating me by the end of the month because it's a broken record. It's gonna be a broken record, meaning you're gonna hear this over and over again. I'm not concerned about the color. I'm more concerned about the value. So if it's a dark shape, I'm gonna make it dark. All right, so that's one layer of dark. Now that's not very beautiful. So I want to make it more interesting, so I want to make a more interesting dark, so I'm going to add another layer of dark. Now, in this set, it's very simple because all I have to do is pick one from the dark row. So I'm going to pick a dark violet and just go back over these same areas. It's kind of like doing a puzzle. Once you get it started, you kind of have a roadmap that you get to follow. So wherever I see the dark, I'm reinforcing it with this dark violet. Now let's pick another dark. I'm going to jump over, that's black. Let's go with, because this will really throw you. How about a dark green? I can put a dark green in these dark areas and it will work because it's the same value. And so what ends up happening is Our eye optically blends them. We see it as just a new color, a dark mask, but that's a little bit more interesting than if I just went straight for dark brown. Now I named this cat Toblerone because his little ears reminded me of the triangle candy Toblerone. And what is a chocolate bar? What color is it? We would say brown, right? That's the local color of a piece of chocolate. But if I just made his chocolate ears brown, it would not be very interesting. So I am layering color by value. Now I am going to pick up a dark brown. That's going to come last. Meanwhile, I have built up all this other color so that his fur is going to look more interesting than if I had just made it brown. And I hope that makes sense. And by the way, I do the same exact thing when I'm painting a tree. I use multiple colors that are the same value. Now we also have to be concerned about what's happening in the background. Do you want anything that's dark in the background? And really, in this particular case, there's not anything dark. In fact, it's pretty light because of the light coming through the window. Now, before moving on, I take one extra step and I look and I say, when I squint, is there any area that's really dark? Really, like much darker than anything else? And if there are, I use the darker value. You could use black, but I'm going to just use the Terry Ludwig eggplant. When I squint at this picture, I see that his ear tips seem to be, or the edges of his ears seem to be lined with a much darker value, right under his ear. Squint, squint, squint. And when you squint, you can see that it's much darker right under his face and right under his paws, and right under the bottom of his tail, because there's a shadow where it's hitting the area where he's laying down. So and then where else? It is actually a little bit darker right in this part of his face, his little eyes, sleepy eyes. And by the way, I did measure the eyes to make sure they fell in the right place. Now, we move on to the lights. So we do the same process, only this time I'm going to use colors that are from the light column. If I didn't have this set, I would have picked these out in advance, but this just makes it easy. And I'm going to I look at the light on the cat and I say, well, he's not got white fur. He has like a tannish, beige fur, but where the light is hitting him from the window, it's actually almost looks white. But I'm not going to use white. So I'll start off with a, well, we used blue to begin with, right? So let's use the light blue. Again, we're going to squint. When I squint, I see that the top of his head has got light on it. And slightly as it goes around the bend, and definitely there's light on the top edge of his back right there. And then also there's light hitting the top of his back right here and right here, and a little bit on his flank and a little bit sticking up right there where his leg turns over. And that's pretty much it for the lights. So I'm going to go through the same process. Let's add a light touch back in the same areas. I'm adding a pale purple in the same areas where I see that there's light. A light touch. If you don't use a light touch, you're not going to be able to get the layers. How about a light green? Now that's kind of weird, right? Would you ever think about putting light green in fur? But you will see, hopefully, that it really is not going to make much of a difference. And what it will do is make the color much more interesting in the painting. What else did we use? We used a dark yellow. Let's try that. Or light. Sorry, I said the wrong word. Well, we're working on the lights. I have 10 minutes left. Oh my goodness. I think what's going to happen with this particular video is it might need to be a two-part series let's go with the pale peach, because I really don't want to rush this process so that you can understand how it works. And then finally, when I look at it, it's really, really light and almost white, but I don't want to use white, so I'm going to use the palest light that I have, which is a very pale yellow. And I'll just hit it with that. So you can see that I've built up layers of color, starting with the dark, going on to the light, and now we're going to do middle value. One thing that, because that's what's left, one thing that I did not mention is the marks that I'm making. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm going in the direction that the fur is growing. So I'm not just going across, I'm not just going up and down, but I'm curving my marks to suggest the way the fur grows on the animal. So pay attention to where that is happening and you're going to have a good result. So middle value, I'm going to go right here in this row. Again, we started with blue. All we got to do is go back and fill in these areas. It's actually a pretty simple process. Where is it? Middle value. And you might be asking, well, it might be middle value, but some areas seem a little bit darker, some areas, it's not perfect. You're going to make adjustments. This is your initial block in. Oh, one thing, and I forgot to do this. I never like to wait till the end to put on my background, because then your animal looks like it's pasted on. So I know that's a middle value, and I know I wanted light in the background. Oops, so I'm just backtracking just a little bit. I wanted it to be really light right in there and then get slightly darker as we go, as we move over. And I don't have to completely finish the background, but I do want to put some color in on the background. Because you know what ends up happening, oh, come back. What ends up happening is what colors you put in the background you want to have in your animal. And that way, that's kind of like in a landscape, that earth-sky connection. We want there to be a connection between what's happening in the animal and what's happening in the background. Then they really start to talk to one another. So I'm just going down this middle row, just like I've done in those other areas. Throw in a little green. And do you see that it's almost starting to look like fur color, even though they're kind of not the colors that are really in his fur? And this kind of goes like this. I will be making corrections as the painting progresses. But again, this is just that initial block in. Blocking it in by value. And again, a lot of times when I know that it's a light value or a middle value, I say to myself, put it in the, if I put it down in the animal, I'll pull it into the background. And then that way they kind of have a visual connection. That's supposed to be the middle value, so let's correct that. Now, one thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to stop this video because I think I've given you enough information, but one thing that I'm going to start to do as I refine the cat is I'm going to start to use more of the local color, meaning the cat is brown, so I'm going to introduce more browns. The background I want to make a little, I'm not going to make this leopard print. I see that it's more blue in the shadow area of the cat, so I'm going to add a little bit more blue. So I'm going to do some refining based upon studying the photo. And there's one thing about painting animals for me is, I can see already that I have a weird shape going on with his face. I'll have to fix that. But one thing that I find with painting animals as opposed to painting a landscape is it takes a lot more time. So I think there's probably no way that I could do this in a 30-minute video anyways, just because it is a much more time-consuming, more thoughtful process. I think mainly what I wanted to get across in this video is this way of building color by value, and working on the background at the same time as you work on the foreground. Getting it started, blocking it in, and then coming back and refining it. And it really does take a lot more paying attention to detail, more so than in a landscape. So we will expand upon all of these things over the course of the month. And please, if you've got any questions at all, let me know, and we were going to have a lot of fun this month. So let's paint.